Okay, hello to this talk about the best practice to design Odoo cron. In this talk, you are going to learn how to get your cron never be deactivated by the scheduler automatically. Or if you are in a version before 18, have your cron burning your CPU forever for nothing. I'm a developer in the internal team of Odoo. We take care of the internal platform, and we are facing those kind of issues quite often, so I'm talking about my experience. But first, for those who don't know what is a cron, let's make a little recap. So basically, a cron, it's a record in database in the table schedule action. Basically, it's a server action, so a piece of code that's run with a given frequency. You can be every minute, every month, doesn't matter. You can also specify the next execution time, so you can schedule the exact hour or minute your cron will be executed. In the code, you will usually see it like this, like a XML record that is calling a method, a Python method. In your business code, so in your Python code, you can also decide to trigger a cron automatically or at a specific time with this new method trigger. I think it's new from 17, 18. So basically, that's it. It's super simple. So let's take two use cases, see their naive implementation and the pitfall of those implementation. So the first use case is subscription invoicing. So basically, what you do is to invoice every month your customer. So you take all your subscription open, you create an invoice for them, and you make the payment because you want to gather the payment from the acquired. Super easy. For the other example is the calendar synchronization. You want to synchronize as much as possible, but in this case it can be twice a day, all your users that have activated the synchronization with Google, and could be Microsoft. So basically you are searching for all the users, and for each user, calling the magic method sync Google Calendar that's doing all the stuff for this user. Okay, so what are the pitfalls of those implementation? First, there is a lack of robustness. So if one record fail, arise an exception, all the transaction is rolled back and nothing is accomplished. Everything is rolled back. It's a long monolithic transaction. So it means you are looking a lot of record for a lot amount of time. So you risk to have a lot of concurrent update with that kind of transaction. And once again, if it time out, everything roll back. It's only one transaction, so you have achieved nothing. Yeah, since here, with those examples, you contact external API, for example, Google, or your payment acquired, you may end up in inconsistent state because you send a request to them, they probably commit in their own system, but you roll back in your system. So you end up with inconsistent state. And since those crons are looking for all the data you want to process, if your company grows, what I hope it's doing, your data to process will grow eventually. And if it's not timeouting right now, it will timeout. So that's bad. And finally, for the subscription invoicing, if you run it twice the same month, you are going to invoice twice your customer. They probably won't be happy. All those pitfalls, it's the road to get your cron deactivated. So how this deactivation works, it's a new feature from version 18. Why it's a feature? Before that, you had just a cron running forever, silently, burning your CPU, which was even worse than getting deactivated. How it works? When you have your cron failing 5 times in a row for at least 7 days. So if it's a cron that runs every hour, of course, it will fail more than 5 times before getting deactivated. And 3 timeout count as a failure. So if you have 5 failures in a row, then 3 timeout, it gets deactivated as well. Or if you have 15 timeout, it gets deactivated. Unless you use the new API to notify your progress. So basically, you are going to tell to the scheduler, I have accomplished something with the done, and I have that much remaining to do. Okay? So this is the API for version 18. There is a new API for version 19, which is commit progress. The main difference is that notify progress doesn't commit. You have to do it yourself. Otherwise, the progress won't be taken into account in other transactions. So for the scheduler, he won't notice your progress. The commit progress commit automatically. And you can tell him the remaining only once, and then just tell how many you have processed at each batch. So you will see in the example, it's a bit more easy to use. So when you notify your progress, if your done is bigger than 0, it means you have accomplished something. So a timeout won't count as a failure anymore. If you have done bigger than 0 and remaining bigger than 0, your cron will not restart at the next execution date, but it will restart ASAP, because you want to finish what you have to process. Okay? So let's see the best practice to use this new API. First, your cron need to be idempotent. What does it mean? It means that if you run your cron twice on a record, it should give the same result as if you run it once. So basically here, for the subscription invoicing, if you run it twice the same month, you want to end up with only one invoice. How to achieve that? You need to keep track of the data you have processed. Here we use a new field, next invoice date, and basically we are looking only for the record that have a next invoice date today, and once the invoicing is complete, we move it to the next month. The good thing is that the frequency of your cron is decorrelated with the frequency of the data you need to process. So you want to invoice once a month, but actually you can run your cron every day. That's not a problem. And it's safe to retry. If someone by mistake click on run manually, you don't have disaster. Idempotent is really important. But it's not always needed. For the user, for the Google synchronization, if there is no new record in Google or in Odoo, of course you want them to be synchronized. So if you run it twice, after a few minutes, you may end up with different results, but that's not a problem. But what you don't want is to have an event being synchronized twice and end up 2 times in Google or 2 times in Odoo. So here the idempotency is implemented inside the sync calendar. So there is nothing to do at our level. So once you have an idempotent cron, you want it to be incremental. This is paramount. Basically, it means you are going to split your work in small batch and commit those batch, commit at the end of those batch. Okay? So since you commit at the end of your batch, the timeout will be resolved eventually because you are progressing. You are not going to be deactivated due to timeout, and you have shorter transaction. Shorter transaction means less risk of concurrent update. How we implement that in version 18? Well, you are going to use notify progress and commit. To notify your progress, you need to know how many records you already have achieved. Enumerate is really good for that. We start at 1. And the remaining is just the total, so the number of records we have to process minus what you already achieved. And you see there is a little weird line, subscription equals subscription 0. This is actually for performance optimization. When you commit, your cache will be invalidated. But you probably know that Odoo fetch 1,000 all the records cert, or at least 1,000 records each time. But if you invalidate at each record your cache, at each record you are going to fetch 1,000 records. It's super slow. So here you are just telling the ORM, fetch only a value for this record. Okay? So it's a small optimization. Be careful when you commit. Make sure that you are done with that record. Don't commit, for example, here after the creation of the invoice, because you may end up with an invoice and no payment request done. Let's see for the version 19 with Google Calendar. Here we are using commit progress. And you see, I'm committing the progress after the initialization, so after searching for my record. This is actually, it's to tell how many records I have in total. So then I don't have to worry about it later. And it's also a good practice because you're reducing the size of the transaction, the duration of the transaction for the first record. Otherwise, you will have only initialization and then the first record and then only the commit. So your transaction is that big. But if you commit your initialization, you only have the same size as all the further batch. Okay? To make it incremental here, since we always want to synchronize all the user, we are using a new field last sync time, and we order them by sync time. So we make sure that we always synchronize all the user before we synchronize a new user. Okay. And for the commit progress, we just say here, since it's one record, we commit progress 1. And we don't have to commit separately. It's already committing for you. So that's the version 19 style. Once you have an incremental cron, you want it to make it robust. That's super easy. You just catch the exception, the relevant exception, and for data consistency, you roll back. That's it. So you will have no more deactivation due to failure because you are catching the error. And even if there is a record that fails, you will process the further record that are correct. So you process all your correct record. You just left behind the one that failed. But the problem with that, you have some record that fails silently because you are catching the exception. So be verbose about the error. You see here, I'm logging the error. And you can log as much information as you want. And you can use logger exception to have the traceback if you want. OK, so robust, it's super easy. And then, since you leave a record behind, you want it also to have that I call a complete cron. It means that you don't leave a record behind. And you see here the change is really, really small for the subscription invoicing. We are processing the next invoice date today, but also in the past. So if it fails, the next day we are trying again. OK? So we recover from temporary failure. If it's the external API that failed, the next day probably it will be solved, and that's fine. For the Google Sync, it's even easier. Since we want to synchronize all the time all the user, there is nothing to do. It was already complete. There is a problem with this completeness. You may pile up wrong record. And those wrong records will be retry every time. So it means you may end up only processing those wrong records, timeouting before achieving anything. And you are back to the deactivation because you are timeouting 15 times in a row, doing nothing. So to solve that, we want your cron to be bounded, which means you set boundary for retrying your error. You don't do it forever. So to achieve that, you need to keep track of the error. For the Google synchronization, we can use, for example, an error count. We want to filter out those who have too much error. And when everything goes well, of course, we set back this error count to 0. But if something goes wrong, we are incrementing this error. Notice that, of course, we roll back when something goes wrong. But then you have to commit for this change because you want to this increment to be available in the next transaction. OK? For the invoicing, it's even easier. You have your filter where you filter all the subscription in the past, but you can say not too much in the past. For example, only 15 days or 10 days. It all depends on what are your needs. The cool thing with that, you don't waste time processing wrong record forever, and your timeout will resolve eventually. OK? But this is a trade-off with completeness, because you may put aside some record. And those records need somehow to be processed. If it's a pay slip that needs to be paid, of course, you want it to be paid. So you need a way to find those records. With the subscription invoicing, it's easy. It's the next invoice date, which is lower than 15 days ago. For the calendar synchronization, we had the error count. So usually, when you keep track of the error, it's easy to find them. But don't forget that those records should be handled manually. The data maybe need to be corrected, or your code need to be corrected. In both cases, there is you need a manual intervention. OK, a small bonus. You may want to have your cron splittable. What does it mean? It means that you keep the same method, but you are going to call this method with different cron record. So that's why you have the piece of code on the left, is to show you that this part of the code is actually inside the server action. How to achieve that? First, in your method, you are going to take an extra parameter, IDs. If there is some IDs, you trust them, and you are going to process those IDs. If there is no IDs, you just go as usual. And then, in your server action, for the Google synchronization, we want to speed up and use parallelism. So to have multiple cron worker doing the job at the same time. And the easiest to split them is to split them by IDs. How we achieve that? Well, we make the usual search. We filter based on the modulo, here 4 because we want 4 of them. And the only thing that changes in your different server action is the mod remainder from 0 to 3. Of course, if you have 10 of them, it's from 0 to 9. And you pass your ID. As simple as that. But you may also want to split for other reasons. For example, your subscription invoicing, you don't want to have them running during the work hour. But bad luck, you have company all over the world, and there is always someone working somewhere in your company. But of course, you can just segment them by continent. So once again, here you will have your IDs in your method. And here in the server action, we are going to add a filter based on the company. Here we filter on the MEA company. We can have another one for America company and for Asia company. And we pass those IDs. And the only goal here is to schedule those actions at different time. Okay, they are not running together. Be careful with parallelism. If they work and they log the same record, for an easy example is you create invoice for the same journal. You are going to log the journal for the sequence, and you may end up with concurrent update. So make sure you split them properly. It has to be tested case by case. Okay, last bonus. Maybe you have seen in the code of Odoo and the module that we have if we are in test mode, don't commit in the cron. Well, that's over. Now you can use enter register test mode. Basically, what it does, it neutralizes the commit. Because having commit in your test, it's quite bad. It's messing up all the tests and everything. You always want your test to be rollback. This enter register test mode, roll it back. And if you want to have more information about it, you can see the class test cursor. It's what's using it. And the good thing with that, you don't need to worry about the test mode in your cron implementation. Just implement it as it was the business, the production code. Okay? So in conclusion, the recipe for a good cron is basically be idempotent, incremental, really that's paramount, robust, complete. It's also nice to have them bounded, so don't retry your record all the time. Splittable, it's super easy to implement and can be handy in the future. And of course, verbose in terms of error. But if there is only one thing you need to remember about this talk is commit your progress. And that's it. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Thibaut, for your talk. And so we have some questions. Okay. Where can I get that Odoo SAP sticker?
You need to ask the person in the front here. He's the dealer.
Does it mean that with this notification commit of progress, there is no need for use of save point in the crons?
Oh, that's a good question. Don't use save point anymore. We really had big mess, especially when you use read-only replica with save point. You never need a save point in the cron. Usually you're working on a specific record, and when it's done, you can commit or roll back. You don't need a save point. And if you are working by batch, some implementation want to have, okay, let's try the batch. If the batch fail, we are going to have save point for each record, and if everything, to detect the wrong record, that's a nightmare. It ends up with a really performance issue on Postgres. If you want to discuss this specific topic, I invite you to discuss with Olivier Denis. He investigated more than me. But basically, we chase all the save points in Odoo codes, standard code, and try to remove them. You can use it when it's not in a loop, but when you have more than 6 for save point, it's getting really nasty.
Next question. How to choose an amount of records to process at once?
It's something you have to test case by case. It's a trade-off between fetching as much record, keep short transaction because you don't want to have a big transaction from concurrent update. So it really depends how much time it takes to process one record. And if you process a batch of record, you always have to handle, okay, but what if one record failed in that batch? But yeah, it's really case by case.
Can they get the slides?
I guess so, yes.
There's also the recording, so.
Yeah, there's a recording and can put the slides URL on the pad.
In Odoo SH, on a shared server, is there a dedicated cron worker to handle schedule actions, or are cron jobs executed with the same worker, allocated to specific project that handle the rest of the Odoo application?
So the question is basically, is there a separate worker for cron? I'm not a specialist of SH implementation, but I believe yes, there is one separate cron, one separate worker for the cron.
Mention that commit progress returns how long is left until timeout while.
Yeah, that's true. So commit progress also return a value. If it's falsy, it means you are running out of time, because the good practice is to have your cron running for a short amount of time. So if it's a return of a falsy value, you could just break your work and let the scheduler reschedule it for you. But if you have a really long initialization, it can be complicated.
Another message about the sticker. And then, as a QA specialist from Croatia, can I use cron for automated tests?
Cron for automated tests. Maybe you need to specify the question, because automated test is never done on the production database. You can have a specific database that run your test, create another instance. Actually, it's more or less what the runbot do, I guess. It's a cron instance, it's a Odoo instance that spawn Docker to run the test.
If I set a next execution date at 12 p.m. with the cron running once per day, will it keep running at the same time?
Yes, except with the change of hour, so twice a year, because the hour is saved in UTC, and when the hour change, the hour in database doesn't change. So you are switching from 12 to 1 a.m. twice a year.
The test registry thing, is it a 19 feature?
I think so. I need to check. Maybe it's already in 18.
And there was someone typing, but then it got removed, so I guess that's it. Thank you.
That's it? Okay.